problems. All right. So I'm seeing lots of different issues. Well, I see different. I'm seeing the same issues over and over and over again. They're just different issues. With people using peptides, especially people who are using providers who don't know what they're doing. One of the big disconnects that I want to make sure we jump onto first is that the amounts, the dosages that are used in research and the amount that you're supposed to use aren't necessarily the same amount. So don't let this the idea that, well, they use X milligrams, they use 10 milligrams in research. So if you're not using 10 milligrams, then you're doing it wrong. Nope, not the thing, not the case at all. Peptides are signaling function. They tell the body to do things. How efficiently or how well your body does the thing it's told to do is going to be dictative of how much the dosage you should take. For instance, great example. With GLP-1s and GLP-3s like Retta and tirzepatide and semaglutide and things like that, one of the things it forces your body to do is use fat as a fuel source. If you don't produce a lot of B6, therefore you don't have a lot of clean, safe, thin bile, you're going to have problems at the liver. You're going to have cholecystitis. You're going to have gallbladder issues. You're going to have things like that. So you can't run as hot or as hard, push as much as somebody else. And we all have different sensitivities to things. Like we see this with alcohol all the time. This is a really great example. You have people who can drink, 5-6 shots of vodka over the course of an hour, 2 martini or something like that, and they can feel it. They're not that drunk. You have other people who 3 shots in and they're plastered. So we know that this is a factor all the way around. So when you look at research numbers, don't think that you don't get any benefit or you don't get the benefit of the research or whatever if you're not hitting those exact numbers. That's one of the first things to take into account. I would take the research as this thing works in this way. It's been proven to do these things. So that's one of the things. The other thing, like I said, is these peptides are activating things in your body to work the way they're supposed to work. Now, the problem is that if you ask the body to make something, bake the cake analogy. If you're like, hey, the peptide tells the body, bake the cake. And the body goes, we're out of eggs. You're not gonna be able to bake the cake very well. The other side of that is that what sometimes will happen is if you drive the body to bake the cake, it's like, look, I don't have any eggs, but we've got eggs as part of this tissue over here. I can go rip apart that tissue and get the eggs out of that. That happens a lot. So for instance, whenever you're using a GLP-1 and you don't eat, but your body's still being told you need to make sugar for the blood, the body goes, look, we haven't gotten anything in we can make sugar out of, but I got this muscle tissue over here. I can rip that apart and make sugar out of it. So cool. I will just go rip apart this muscle tissue, make some sugar for the blood and for everything else to run on, and we'll be good. And that's how we lose muscle tissue with GLP-1s when your body's not, being properly maintained. You're not taking the androgens, you're not working out, you're not taking the protein and things like this. Peptides just tell the body to do the stuff it's supposed to do. It just activates the chemistry. And so we can be pissy and moany about how we don't like how the things that are required of the chemistry, like gluconeogenesis, tearing apart muscle tissue, we can bitch about it, but there's nothing we can do about it. So you have to supply the function of the body so it knows what it gets the things it's supposed to have. Sometimes we have people who take injections and they get like red welts and stuff like that, or little bruises and things like that. Those are often histamine reactions, just from, mast cells in the body that, release histamine. It's like, oh, there's something, it's not supposed to be here. It's a foreign something coming in. And we want to freak out and tell everybody about it. So those are things that happen. It's, the local ones, the small ones that go away usually within, a day or so. Those are not allergic reactions. Like an allergic reaction is it starts spreading. So you take a shot and it gets red and it just grows and grows. And you're like, oh no. Or your throat swells up, or, you start having other issues. That's a major allergic reaction, borderline on the anaphylactic, when it starts creating a point where you can't breathe. And that's possible. It's just highly unlikely. You can be allergic to anything. But it's just unlikely. What's most likely is that the reactions that you're getting, the local site injection reactions you're getting, are histamine responses. A couple different things you can do for that. You can let the vial warm up. The easiest thing to do is to dilute it a little bit. So if you usually use 2 or 3 or 4 milliliters of water and you're getting reactions, use more. Use 5 or 6 or whatever. because it'll dilute it a little bit, and you just increase the amount you're taking to get the milligram dosages back where it's supposed to be. And if your provider can't figure that out for you, you need a different provider, because that's just injectable math. And if you don't understand how to do that, you shouldn't be providing help with this. So that's an easy one to do. The other options are, I'm not, talk to your doctor about it, because we got to make sure that, drug interactions, all that fun stuff, that's important. But, if you're trying to block histamine, antihistamines can block those things. So factor that in. But those are some of the things you can do for those little reactions. That type of stuff is really not that difficult, and your provider should be helping you kind of work through those things, because again, it's just, how's the chemistry work? The bigger piece is all of the biochemistry. It is the when you put this thing in the body, what is going to happen? Like not just like, oh, it's it's going to help mitochondria. Okay, how? What is it going to do? Is it going to require other nutrients? Is it going to require things that if you don't give the body, it's going to have to take from somewhere else? Because if you don't factor that in, that's a major problem. You need to think that one through, because there's a bunch of stuff that you need to kind of take into account. For instance, this is a great example. If you don't understand that when you give the body testosterone, it's going to convert into estrogen, and so you're pulling estrogen levels to make sure that their estrogen doesn't go too high, you're not providing the care that you need for that person. So, that type of a thing. If you're doing dietary work, if you're doing any type of work with diabetes, you're not pulling fasting insulin. There's no way you're actually treating the actual root problem of what's going on. I see this all the time with diabetics. They come in, they're working with their diabetic, their medical doctor on diabetes, and I'm the first person in 5, 7, 10 years that's ever pulled their fasting insulin. So they've been diabetic for 10 years, and yet we have no track function of their insulin resistance because the doctors wouldn't pull fasting insulin. These are some of those things to just kind of keep in mind when you're working with peptides, is that you're telling the machine to do something specific. You need to make sure that you're checking that whole pathway. Otherwise, you're not going to get the benefit out of it. The other thing is, like, people come in like, well, the research shows that, these people needed 10 milligrams. I mean, you just use 10 milligrams. They needed 10 milligrams of this to get the process to work. Okay, again, with the research, what was the goal? Oh, the goal was to reverse this massively damaged body that's highly inefficient at production of ATP, because we're talking about mitochondrial function. Well, then, yeah, you're going to need a lot more to bridge the gap between complete decimation and a little bit dirty. So, that type of an idea. So when you read research is getting to the point where it's always been like this, and people don't understand. Research asks a question, and the research will answer a question. So your research can be very well done and be completely pointless, which is what you get with a lot of the medical research. Well, the medical research, like the COVID vaccine, it was 95% effective. And they said that, and it was. But what was it 95% effective at? When they say it's 95% effective, you think, oh, well, it's 95% effective at stopping transmission and keeping me from getting sick. And so, no, it was 95% at getting the spike protein to show up on the labs. Hey, if we inject this into you, 95% of the people show afterwards that they've gotten the vaccine in their body. So it was 95% effective at getting in. That's not beneficial because it didn't do anything positive. So when you read the research, you have to understand, how are these things all tied together? And so, because I get people all the time who are taking 4 or 5 peptides, they don't have the nutritional function with it, they're not sleeping, they're not doing all the things they're supposed to, and they don't understand why they feel bad, and their stuff's not working. So when you're going to take these in, and it's you can do this research yourself. Like, anybody who knows what they're doing with peptides and hormones learned on their own. This is not taught in med school. Like, I'm literally teaching this to doctors. So like with med spas and stuff like that. So, this is where we're at. Like, the guys who are just now researching it, like learning it, you can go learn it yourself. Just figure out, what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? Why are you trying to use the thing? And what's connected chemically to that physiological process. And if that's more than you want to deal with, hire somebody to do it for you. But don't expect somebody who's already got it. Like, the vast majority of problems from the GLP-1s were provider problems, not GLP-1 problems. The tool was used very haphazardly and wrong. If you're not taking supplementation, if you're not working out with your GLP-1s, you are doing it in an unsafe manner. Just flat out. One of the reasons that we see that you may the lost muscle loss, the Ozempic face and stuff like that is because people were not getting a proper guidance and tutelage on how to use it. But this is what happens with everything that's new. I keep seeing all sorts of funny stem cell stuff. People are, I got this stem cell IV for my joints. Like, well, that's full exosome MSC. That's not going to make it through your lungs. So you got great lung coverage, but nothing for the joints. So little things like that. But as new stuff comes out, this is what's going on. So when you're looking at these peptides, if you're having issues with them, and you're like, why am I having this reaction and somebody else isn't? You have a different reaction than everybody else does. Your body works a little differently than other people do. And so once you understand how the physiology works, it's a lot easier to figure out, okay, you just need to do this and add this in and you'll be fine. But don't just run away from peptides. I talked to somebody yesterday who she had a really bad experience with Bretta because she was using about 8 times more than she was supposed to. And she was always nauseous and hated it and this and that. And so she tried it for 3 weeks and then finally gave up because she couldn't deal with it. When she was told that that was the lowest dose she could take, which was wrong. It was significantly higher than she should have been taking to begin with. So just make sure that you guys are factoring this in, that you understand the chemistry around it, the holistic function around it. And it'll help tremendously with reducing the issues that you're going to have. So when you want to start looking at a peptide, let's just use Retta as an example because I just brought it up. If you can get with somebody who understands insulin function, glucagon function, who understands insulin resistance, who understands insulin sensitivity, who understands lipolysis, or understands ATP production from fats and sugars. So this is where, like when I talk about how calories aren't real, calories are made up nonsense, this is what I'm talking about. There is no calories in metabolic chemistry. There isn't, because they don't exist. They're not a real thing. So you have to understand when you consume when this thing happens, when you get glucose in the system, what's going to happen with hormonally. So insulin functionality, how is insulin functionality tied to inflammation, and how does glucagon resolve these issues and that type of thing before you use Retta? Because once you understand the glucagon functionality and what it's actually doing, you can then properly adjust what's going on in the body to be highly beneficial. And you guys can read this information. This information is not like hidden, and it's not impossible to learn. But if you don't have time, there's not just me. There's other guys out there that can do this, who have studied it and who have learned it. And I will tell you that the vast majority of the guys who know what they're talking about look like me. Like I've heard a lot of people talk, and I've had a lot of medical doctors talk, and they don't have a clue what they're talking about, or they're lying on purpose, one of the two. But the guys that have been consistently accurate with the research, the information like that, they're all biohackers and bodybuilders, because this is the world we live in. We've been we know about this stuff for a lot longer than everybody else, because we've been using it with our buddies, with our friends. We've been doing the research on ourselves. So that's why this people know, and they're safe, because if you're going to inject it, if I'm going to put something in my body, I'm going to know a lot about it before I do it. Same thing with a lot of these other guys. So there's people out there who can do this. Don't try to wade into this by yourself. You're not going to get the results you want. But peptides are really, really safe if they're used properly. It's just you've got to understand what's going on around them to really kind of make them the most optimal and the safest you can. So dig into them, read through them, see what people are doing, see what they're doing and getting results with. When you see the problems people are having, you need to kind of understand where are these problems coming from, because you're telling the body to do something and it didn't. And so if you have consistent problems, hey, 20% of people had this issue. Okay, well, there's a metabolic processes that is being told to do that. What's the metabolic process that's told to do that? What's been told to eat the muscle tissue? Why the muscle tissue leaving? Once you figure that out, you can find the solve for it. It's not that hard. If that's not your bag, find somebody who does. So anyway, those are the easiest way to go through the peptide issues. Most likely, you're going to have to find somebody to do this with you. I would highly recommend that you do that. It's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of frustration, and it could be significantly beneficial to your health. I've seen lots of people do stupid stuff and hurt themselves with GLP-1s that they didn't need to do, or they shouldn't happen to them. So my recommendation is find somebody who knows what they're doing and work with them. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for your time.